everyone, I'm Andrea Kennedy, analyst with the Housing Division for the City of Mountain View, and I'm here together with my colleague Patricia Black, and we would like to share some information with you about the temporary eviction moratorium in Mountain View.
Thank you for the introduction. Hi there, everyone. As Andrea mentioned, my name is Patricia Black, and I am also an analyst with the Housing Division. In late December of 2019, several cases of a novel coronavirus known as COVID-19 emerged in China. And by the end of January of 2020, the World Health Organization had declared the spread of the virus a public health emergency of international concern. As a result of the spread of the virus, on March 17th, the Mountain View City Council approved a local emergency declaration in response to the pandemic.
In these difficult times, there is a lot of uncertainty on how we are going to be affected by this crisis. To help stabilize the community, and in the interest of protecting public health and safety and preventing the spread of the virus, the City Council adopted a temporary eviction moratorium on March 27, 2020. The moratorium suspends evictions for non-payment of rent for residential tenants financially impacted by the health crisis. Please check our website for updates at mountainview.gov/eviction relief. All right, so today we are going to be doing a Q&A style video to talk to you about the key components of the moratorium. All right, let's get started. Patricia, can you tell me a little bit about the eviction moratorium?
Of course. The eviction moratorium suspends all residential evictions related to non-payment of rent if a tenant is financially impacted by the pandemic. The moratorium went into effect on March 27th, 2020 and lasts through August 31st, 2020. This date may be extended by the City Council. They've already extended the date from May 31st to August 31st. If impacted tenants are unable to pay their rent, they cannot be evicted for this reason during the moratorium. Once the moratorium ends, tenants have 180 days to pay back the past due rent. Right now, that date for repayment is February 28th of 2021. And all residential rental units in Mountain View are covered. This includes single-family homes, condos, townhomes, duplexes, apartments, including those covered by our local rent stabilization law, the CSFRA, and mobile homes and mobile home spaces, and other types of residential rental units like rooms and houses. Just to be clear, CSFRA rent stabilized units are covered by the eviction moratorium. And we want to emphasize that this moratorium does not waive rent payments, and tenants should pay as much of their rent as they can, even if it's only a partial payment. This way, tenants are not left with a large amount of money to pay after the emergency is over. The moratorium simply means that while the public health crisis exists, a landlord cannot evict a tenant for not paying their rent if the financial hardship is related to the pandemic. So essentially, the moratorium suspends rent payments for qualifying tenants if they're unable to pay rent due to the pandemic. Does this help clarify the moratorium a little?
It does, thank you.
Hey, Andrea, I have a question for you. How do tenants know if they qualify for the moratorium?
Right, so all residential tenants, and I mean all of them, all residential tenants who experience a significant decrease in income related to the pandemic will qualify. So these impacts can be such things as job loss or layoff, business, store, or restaurant closure, reduction in hours worked, substantial decrease in business hours or demand, the need to care for a homebound child, if their school is closed and the child is unable to attend school physically and the parent has to stay home, that would qualify. Or if you have to take care of a sick family member who has come down with COVID-19. Also, federal, state, or local action that prevents a tenant from working, like the shelter in place directive that we have, And also, if you are experiencing substantial out-of-pocket medical expenses related to the pandemic. And I do want to point out that self-employed tenants are covered as long as they can provide documentation of their financial hardship. So this would include people who work as contract employees, day laborers, or even housekeepers.
Andrea, are our undocumented community members covered by the moratorium?
Yeah, that's a good question. They are definitely covered under the moratorium, and more broadly, any tenant, including undocumented community members, are covered under the eviction moratorium if they are experiencing income loss related to COVID-19.
Thank you.
All right. So our next question, if a tenant qualifies and they cannot pay their rent, what should they do?
So tenants should notify their landlord as soon as possible in writing, but especially within 7 days after the rent is due. This notification can be a letter, a text message, or even email, and a fillable form is available on the city's website to help with notifying landlords. It has all the information a tenant needs to help them fill it out and is available in English, Spanish, and Chinese. Tenants need to apply for the moratorium each month that they are unable to pay the rent due to the pandemic. And even though we have this form that can help people, tenants do not have to use it. They can just provide an email, a text message, or a letter to their landlord. There are also community-based programs to help tenants pay rent. The Mountain View City Council approved a rent relief fund for affected tenants. And if you are unable to pay rent due to the pandemic, tenants can contact the Mountain View Community Services Agency by emailing renthelp@csacares.org and requesting assistance. For more information on this program, you can go to mountainview.gov/COVID relief. Also, the County of Santa Clara has set up a rent relief fund for eligible households, and people can add their names to an interest list and they will be contacted when funding is available. For more information on this program, please visit sacredheartcs.org/COVID-19. Tenants who qualify for the eviction moratorium should notify their landlord of financial hardship and provide documentation, even if they've applied for rental assistance.
All right, so let's try an example. So let's say a tenant was able to pay their rent in June and then they lost their job. They know they will not have enough money to cover July's rent. When should they have notified the landlord?
This is such a difficult situation, and we know people are experiencing it in Mountain View. Again, we recommend that all tenants who are experiencing this notify their landlord as soon as they know that they're not able to pay the rent. Even though under the ordinance, tenants have until 7 days after the rent is due to formally let their landlord know in writing of the impact, we recommend that they notify their landlord immediately. This helps everyone prepare for the future.
And does the tenant have to do anything other than just notifying the landlord in writing?
That's a great question. They absolutely do. Tenants must provide documentation of their financial hardship to their landlord within 14 days after rent is due. This can be a letter from their employer, pay stubs or bank statements documenting their income before and after the impact, letters or notifications from schools, or any other documentation, such as COVID-19 related medical expenses. If tenants miss either deadline, they should still provide the information as soon as possible and contact the Mountain View Rental Housing Helpline at csfra@housing.org or by calling 650-282-2514. Andrea, I also have a follow-up question for you. Once the moratorium ends, what happens?
Yeah, so after the moratorium ends, the past due rent must be paid back within 180 days. So the moratorium currently ends on August 31st, 2020, and the payback deadline is February 28th, 2021. But this date can be extended by the City Council.
Do tenants have to schedule a repayment plan or provide payments throughout that time period, or pay at the beginning or pay at the end? Is there any guidelines on how the repayment happens?
Right, so the ordinance says that once the moratorium is over, which right now is August 31st, 2020, they have to start paying their past due rent back, and the deadline to pay is February 28th, 2021. However, we do have some other options. We have our Mountain View Mediation program, which can help landlords and tenants come to a repayment plan that works for both parties. And this could be a longer period than the February 28, 2021. But I do want to say, if you can start paying it back, we recommend that you start paying it back as early as you can, because it does prevent you from having a large sum of money to pay back at the end. So you can work with your landlord, maybe it's $100 a month, or whatever really works for both parties. But I would say definitely be in contact with the landlord and pay as you go, so you're not left with a big chunk of money there at the end.
But you don't have to, right? You don't have to do that. That's just an option.
That's just an option, correct.
Thank you for that. I've been a little confused about that. What about landlords, Andrea? What can landlords do during the eviction moratorium?
Good question. So landlords can proactively tell tenants about the moratorium. So by visiting our website at mountainview.gov/eviction relief/landlord info, they can access resources that are made available to them. The website has packets that include a fact sheet, a notice that the landlords can give to the tenant, as well as a notice that the tenant can provide to the landlord if they are experiencing these hardships. And these forms are available in English, Spanish, and Chinese. And we also want to mention that during the moratorium, landlords who receive notification from tenants financially impacted by COVID-19 cannot evict the tenant for not paying rent. So landlords are prohibited from assessing late fees, interest, or penalties on past due rent that is covered by the moratorium. Additionally, COVID-19 notices can be used as an affirmative defense by impacted tenants in unlawful detainer court. Landlords who violate the ordinance are subject to code enforcement action, administrative penalties, and fines pursuant to the city code. Retaliation or harassment against impacted tenants for invoking their rights under the moratorium is prohibited. We also encourage tenants and landlords to connect with the Mountain View Mediation Program to help them effectively communicate and resolve any issues regarding the moratorium and rent repayments. The program is fast, it's free, and it is 100% confidential.
So, Andrea, that's the second time that you've mentioned the Mountain View Mediation Program. And, I don't know much about the mediation program. Is it a city-based program? What is it? Can you tell me more about it?
Sure. So the mediation program is a city-based program, and it helps people come together and talk about and potentially solve issues with a trained mediator. So in this case, mediation could help a tenant and a landlord decide on a repayment plan, which I mentioned earlier, for that past due rent. So repayment plans, again, are not required under the ordinance, but we do highly encourage them. And using mediation will not impact the tenant's applicability for the temporary eviction moratorium.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for clearing that up for me. Hey, as we've been talking today, I started thinking about other types of evictions. Are they still allowed during this time?
Yeah, good question. So the Mountain View eviction moratorium only applies to terminations for non-payment of rent due to the pandemic. If you receive or are planning to give a termination notice, we recommend that you contact the Mountain View Rental Housing Helpline at csfra@housing.org or by calling 650-282-2514. All right, now I have a question for you. I haven't heard anything about commercial tenants. Does the eviction moratorium apply to them?
Small business commercial tenants are actually covered by the County of Santa Clara's eviction moratorium, just like residential tenants who receive no fault termination notices from their landlords. They're also covered by the county's moratorium. And the Mountain View moratorium is specifically limited to residential tenants for non-payment of rent due to COVID-19. A link to the county's moratorium that can tell you about the other residential moratorium and the small business commercial moratorium is available on our website at mountainview.gov/eviction relief. Oh, Andrea, that was a lot of information that we covered in a short amount of time. Is there anything that you can recap for us or maybe provide some key takeaways?
Yes, that was a lot of information. So the key points that we want to remember about the temporary eviction moratorium are that first and foremost, it applies to all residential tenants who have experienced financial hardship due to the pandemic. Tenants should pay rent if they can, even if it is only a partial payment, again, to avoid that lump sum payment at the end. Qualifying tenants need to do two things. First, notify their landlord immediately that they are unable to pay their rent, but at least notify them within 7 days after rent becomes due. Secondly, tenants must provide documentation of their financial hardship to the landlord as soon as possible, but at least within 14 days after rent becomes due. And after the moratorium ends, tenants have 180 days to pay back the past due rent. And that would be by February 28th of 2021. And above all else, we want to make sure you know, contact us if you have any questions. So you can view our website at mountainview.gov/eviction relief, which also provides the form for tenants to notify their landlords if they're impacted. And it's also going to provide that packet that landlords can give to their tenants if they realize that they haven't paid the rent yet. Right? So you can also contact us by phone at 650-282-2514 or email the Mountain View Rental Housing Helpline at csfra@housing.org with any questions, or if you would like to set up a mediation with your landlord or your tenant to negotiate a repayment plan.
Thank you, Andrea, for providing that nice little overview of everything that we talked about. That was really helpful. As Andrea said, please contact us if you have any questions or need any assistance. We may not be in our offices, but we are available to help you, and we're working hard to provide essential services remotely. We hope you are all able to stay safe and healthy during this challenging time, and we wish you well. Thank you so much for joining us today.